Hello everyone, I am Prasanjit and today we'll continue with our Ansible configuration management lecture. In the previous lecture we discussed about the Ansible basics and we understood what Ansible does, how it creates deployments across different systems, how it uses SSH to log into different systems and deploys the software, it manages configuration and it can install various packages and so on, and at the same time it can deploy across lots of systems, like multiple systems, tens and hundreds and thousands of systems. So we understood all that, and we also understood that Ansible can be used in two ways. One of them is by just writing simple ad hoc commands. So but when you use that mode, you can do just simple deployments, like for example you just want to install Apache in 50 servers, then you can run ad hoc command and run it in 50 servers together. But if you want to make a complicated things, for example you want to maintain the state of a workflow, for example you want to install a website which contains a database, which contains a front-end Apache, which contains various files to be sourced from somewhere else and to be installed, and lots of other things that have to be done in sequence. And you have to ensure that there are certain triggers, like for example, if the Apache is running, only then you pull the website code base from the repository and so on. So if there are certain conditionals and there is certain complexity to the deployment, then ad hoc command alone doesn't suffice. So in those cases we use Ansible playbooks. So today we'll understand what a playbook is, how it looks like, how to write a playbook, and what are the various parameters inside a playbook. So we'll try to understand a playbook, and once you understand that, we will do a demonstration where we will install a travel website using Ansible, and we'll do this on EC2. So we'll create two instances. One will be the Ansible tower node and the other one will be just a destination node where we will install that website. Now this website is not a simple website. It will be a travel website which has a front end written in PHP and uses a framework called Laravel. So it will install that framework and pull the PHP code from a repository and put it there. And obviously there should be a web server created in Nginx on the destination node before we do all this, and that will take care of the front end. And for the back end we'll install a MySQL database, then we'll import the database SQL file and create the tables in the database, and then we'll change the configurations so that the website gets the front end gets connected to the database, and you'll be able to see the database live. So we'll do all this today. So let's get started. So the first thing I would like to tell you before we start is about playbooks. Like, what does a playbook look like? So in short, it looks like this. For example, it can be just a simple Ansible playbook, which is just a set of commands, just like what we do in a shell script without any conditionals or anything. So it's just run this particular command on this particular server, run command 2 on server 2, run command 3 on server 3, and so on. And you can directly write commands for restarting servers and so on. So this playbook would simply do the thing or the commands it has been asked to execute. So it can be as simple as this one, and it can be a single script playbook, like you don't have multiple scripts that call each other and so on. So it can be as simple as this, or it can be a bit complex where you have various workflows, various requirements, triggers, and so on. So you can have a playbook which deploys 50 virtual machines on a cloud. So it can bring up a virtual machine from ground up. It can provision storages to the virtual machine. it can create the networks, it can create clusters. So in this case it is creating the infrastructure itself, and it can also set up monitoring software, installs backup clients, and anything you can imagine, anything that a human can do manually, that can be written into a playbook. So a playbook can be a big workflow written into a piece of code, or it can be a simple piece of code that has a sequence of operations to be done. So how does a real playbook look like? For this, let's move on to our real demonstration task. So we'll try to understand how that playbook looks like and understand what is our task at hand, and then we'll do the deployment. Because Ansible, the magic of Ansible is once you run the playbook, it does everything very quickly. So it's not like we are running the commands one by one in sequence, checking whether the thing went right and so on. So if everything is right, the playbook will execute just fine. So let's get to our repository. So it is already mentioned in your Ansible notes, which I shared in the previous lecture. So if you have missed out, you can just check this URL. This is the repository which contains the Ansible Laravel demonstration which I was talking about. I'll talk in detail about this now. And once you reach this repository, you will see the code base here for this Ansible playbook. And let me tell you, this Laravel demonstration is taken from DigitalOcean, and we have made certain changes here, and that's how we'll keep working on this. Okay, so first of all, let's see what comprises this playbook. Like, what are the things that comprise this playbook? So once we get to know that, then we will start executing the playbook. So before we go into the code, let's understand what is the objective. What is our objective for this Ansible plus Laravel demo? So the objective is to do these 6 steps. Okay, so basically we will clone this repository on a system from where we want to run the Ansible scripts. So we will have 2 systems basically. One is the EC2 server where we will run the Ansible script from, and then there will be another server where we will have the destination node, and we will use Ubuntu 18.04 for all our demonstrations. So we'll clone the repository to the Ansible node, then we'll set up the inventory file with the host name or IP address of the destination node. So once that is done, then we'll make certain changes, suitable changes to the all.yaml file. So I'll tell you what this is. So these are certain files which would need certain changes so that our deployment runs just all right. And then we will run the server setup.yaml. This is the this will set up all the prerequisites for this demonstration, and then we'll run the real file which will actually install the Laravel framework and the PHP code and the database, import the database and make the configuration connections. So and if all this runs fine, then we'll be able to access our service on the destination node using the public IP address. So the website would be live. So what is this website all about? It is just a sample travel website which is built on Laravel framework, and since we are using this, the reason is it is a very good demonstration of a complex, I mean not very complex, but a moderately complex playbook, because here you are doing multiple things. So this playbook is actually first installing Nginx on the destination node so that the website can run. As you know, Nginx is a web server, so once you put the code there on a web server, you will be able to view a website. Okay, But this is a dynamic website, so it cannot just work with code alone, just like static HTML websites work. So this will need to be connected to a backend, and it should have all the libraries that is required for this website to run. Because it is written in PHP, you should have all the PHP libraries. Since it uses the framework called Laravel, it needs all the Laravel code files, and so on. So this Ansible playbook takes care of all that. It also takes care of installing the database MySQL server. It takes care of installing the MySQL client that PHP will use to connect to the database. Then it also takes care of the script files that will create tables on the database and import data. And finally, it also does the configuration changes which are required for the front end to be able to connect to the database. So these are the various things which are required to make this site up. Okay, if you're unsure about running Ansible at this point, you can go and try one thing. Like, you can try to install a Laravel framework online, manually on a server. Like, you can just go install Nginx, create a LAMP server, Linux, Nginx, MySQL, PHP, and then try to install Laravel by following official documentations. But I don't think you'll need it, because we are here for learning the Ansible playbooks. But if you know all the granular levels, then it always helps. So let's see what the code looks like here. So for any Ansible playbook, normally it is written on, you will see some YAML files, .yml. So YML stands for yet another markup language. So it is a indented language that is used to write Ansible playbooks. So whatever you will see on the root of the repository are the main YAML files that trigger the playbook. So here we can see there is a server setup.yaml and a Laravel deploy.yaml. So from the documentation here, we know that server setup.yaml is a playbook to set up the LAMP server. So it creates the basic, it provides all the basic necessities or prerequisites for the project to be successful. So it will install Apache, it will install MySQL, start the services, and so on. And this will actually do the deployment of that website. So let's first understand how a playbook looks like by opening this server setup.yaml file. So here you can see this is a simple YAML file which triggers certain roles. Okay, so let me tell you what are the various sections of a YAML file. A YAML file always starts with this 3 dashes, which means the start of the file. Just like you start a shell script with a shebang, or a PHP script with a PHP command line greater than question mark icon, and so on. So similarly, this starts with 3 dashes, and there are these sections. The host section defines where this playbook will be executed. So here it's written all, which means whatever nodes are mentioned in the inventory file, so it would run in all those nodes. So we'll create a host file with the destination nodes there, update the IP address of where the destination node, what is the IP of the destination node, and what will be deployed. So we'll do that. And next is become true, which means whether this user would have a sudo power to run the command. So it will become a certain user when it executes the code, so that SU access is enabled. Roles are certain, you can say, libraries which can be called to do certain actions which are already there in a different folder in this playbook. For example, here there are multiple roles that will be called in this playbook. One of the role is, say, installing a MariaDB server. So it will what this role will do, there are certain roles in another directory, like in this roles directory. So here you will see there is a MariaDB directory which will have some subfolders, and it actually contains the tasks which will install the MySQL. So we'll come in detail to that in a while. So let me just go back. So these roles are different plays which are present inside another folder called roles, and these are just pointers to that. So what does this thing do? This says go and do whatever is there in the setup role, then go and do whatever is there in the MariaDB role. So it goes and installs the MySQL in this step. Go and install whatever is there in the PHP role. So it goes and installs the PHP packages when this role is called. So where is this role? It is inside the roles folder, and inside that there are tasks and there are scripts which do certain tasks. So we'll go to that. So this takes this is like a pointer or a menu of what is to be done. Okay, and there are certain roles which contains the actual commands that do this that particular thing. So this is how it is. And okay, at this point let me tell you, like when you want to learn more about Ansible, know various syntaxes, or uh, know what new modules are there and so on, so you can always follow the official documentation. Anything which you are looking for example, you don't understand what a role is, so you can search for it, and you get a lot of examples and stuff from the Ansible documentation, and then you can go on and understand. Like for example, here is something about import role and so on. So you can just do searches like this, and you can understand what that thing is, what are the various examples and so on. So it is a very good documentation done in the Ansible official documentation, docs.ansible.com. So whenever you get stuck, you can always refer that. But normally what we do as professionals, we understand the basic syntax. So we follow any playbook and use that as a template to write our own plays. And also the roles can be sourced from the of Ansible Galaxy. So we'll talk about that in another course, another video that comes for advanced Ansible. For now, we just try to understand what an Ansible playbook looks like. What is this Ansible playbook doing? What are the various components in this playbook? And we try to execute this playbook. So let's restrict ourselves to this for this point of time. And when we go deeper, we'll learn more on Ansible, because Ansible alone is also a vast field. Like if you are just an expert in Ansible, that is also a separate stream. Like you are just a configuration management person who can automate things. But normally as a DevOps generalist, you should know everything. So this would be sufficient for you to write playbooks and deploy it, understand how it works and so on. So that is about a YAML playbook. So what we see here, it simply contains pointers to different roles. So those roles are the actual players which run the playbook. Similarly, this deploy file will also point to various roles. So here you can see certain more commands. So let me just explain what these are. So hosts, become and tasks. So these are the three most important things in a playbook. So under task, whatever is there, that means these are the tasks to be executed, and there would be a name of the task and there would be a module. So these are all modules. So synchronize, file, ACL, these are modules. So for example, this file module, what it does, it makes sure the remote app root exists and has the right permission. So this file module, what it does, it checks the presence of a certain file or a directory, and then checks whether the permissions, desired permissions are there or not. If not, then it applies those permissions and so on. Synchronized module is just like rsync command in Linux. So it would try to synchronize files from a local to a remote server. So in this case, this command will actually copy all the code files from our repository, which is there inside the application directory in this repo, and put it into the remote www root folder, which means the folder in the nginx where you store the web server code. Okay, so this is how this playbook is arranged. Then you have these ACL modules which um, apply permissions. ACL stands for access control list, so it applies permission for each directory which is required for this particular play. So this playbook contains all these tasks to be done when a Laravel framework is to be installed. Alright, so let's go back and see what are the various syntaxes in the roles. Before that, let me also tell you what a group var is. Group var is containing all the variables that are required to be passed. For example, we will have a MySQL server, so we have a password, so you can set the password here. You can set up the remote user name here, and so on. Like it has all these kind of setups. Whatever variables have to be set up in this particular thing, that is done here. We'll come to this file when we set up some variables, because there was a step here which says that change the adjust your values for this particular file, group vars all.yaml. So we'll change if we want to change the password of the MySQL, if we want to have some special changes based on our front end or back end credentials, we can do that. So next is the roles. This roles directory, as I said, it contains the real place which will actually deploy certain packages. So for example, let's go to this nginx role. So inside role there are further subfolders. Each subfolder is there for a reason. So let me tell you what each subfolder contains. Okay, so for example, the first default subfolder contains variables. It's similar to all.yaml. Okay, but variables in all.yaml are global variables, but variables inside defaults are local variables. Like it's only applying to this nginx. So nginx should listen in port 80. The document folder of nginx is this, and IP address of that particular host is this, and so on. So these kind of informations are stored in the main.yaml inside the defaults directory. So what does a handler contain? Handler contains all the triggers. For example, whenever the code is there and nginx is installed, the nginx should always be in a started state. So these handlers will trigger a start of the service. So if someone has kept nginx in a stopped state on a server and you run this playbook, it will again start that. So it will always try to keep it at a state where you have uh, whatever you have defined on the handler. Okay, so handlers, you can just remember that handler contains triggers that would start a certain service. Okay, so if you go inside handlers, you will again see a main.yaml, and you will see it contains all the information that this service has to be always in a restarted or reloaded state. That means it should always be running. Whenever this trigger is hit, it would restart the service. So then it again keeps in a run state. So whenever someone stops it or does whatever, it restarts the service again. So that means it ensures that the service is up. So then comes the directory called tasks. So under roles, task means the actual events that will be done to get this nginx installed. Okay, so Here you find a play which mentions the name. Obviously it contains the name of the play, like what this play does. So you can name according to the steps which you do. So for example, for installing Nginx, we have to run a apt command to install Nginx. So apt is the module which we use to install this particular package. Okay, and update cache and all this depends, I mean it updates the apt cache to install that package. So if you're acquainted with Linux, you would know, like when we use a yum install command or apt get install command, we normally do a apt update so that we update the repository list in our system. So this module with this switch is doing the same thing. Then here it copies the template file and then makes changes to the Apache or Nginx configuration and so on. So all this is about getting the Nginx installed. Okay, so let's again recap what is inside a role. You go to any role, you will see the similar tasks, but we were on Nginx, so let's define this again. Defaults would contain the variables, handlers would contain the triggers that would start or stop a service, tasks would do the necessary actions that would deploy a service, templates would contain the template files or static or dynamic template files for various services. Okay, sometimes there are also another folder which are called a static folder which is called files, which contains various files and images if you want to include them. So that is also present in certain roles. It's not here, but that's present in certain playbooks. Okay, so this is all about how this playbook looks like. So what we'll do, we'll first execute this play that will create the uh, prerequisites on our server, and then we will have this play which will do the deployment of the Laravel website. Okay, but before we start the play, we will also have to update our hosts file. So that will do once the code is checked in into our server. So let's go to AWS console, and there we will start executing this playbook and see how it works and what are the steps we have to do to execute this play. So here we are. Let's head to the EC2 console. So we have two servers already prepared for this. One is the Ansible master, where we'll go and check out the playbook and run it from there. And the target is the node where we will actually install PHP Laravel and put up that website. So we'll be viewing this website on this public IP address of this server, target server, and this is the server where we will log in and do our operation. Okay, so let's log into this server. We click on connect and copy the IP address. So I assume that you already know how to create a server, how to log in using the key file, so I'm not going to reiterate that one again. So let's go to our shell. If you are using Windows, you can do the same thing on putty. We have discussed the process in earlier lectures. So here I am just pasting that command, and that will allow me to go into server Ansible master. So here we are logged into the server. So now we are logged in as user Ubuntu, and I'll keep running the command with the same user because we already have the become commands in the playbooks. So we will be using the root privileges as and when required, and that would be decided by the playbook. So let's head to the repository and try to clone the repository. So this is the repo URL. I copy this one, go back to the server, and I do git clone and the repo URL. So that will clone the repository with all the code and everything which we were just looking at. Laravel demo. So if we do a listing of the files, we see all the files and directories of that playbook here. So the first step is to set up the all.yaml with the required variables. Okay, so that is inside the group wars directory, and we will open that all.yaml with the vi editor, and here you can see these are various like variables. If you want to change the database password, you can put some password, username, whatever you want. These are at your discretion, like whatever you set, that will be your database name, password. Or if you are installing Nginx and you want to put your website on another folder other than vad dev, so you can change that. If you want to name your uh, app root directory, you can change that, and so on. So all this is at our discretion, like whatever we will set, that is where our application will be deployed. So I'm just keeping this unchanged because I don't want to make any changes here. It is as good as whatever is there. So instead of MySQL root password, okay, I am assuming that this is my password, so no worries. For a demo it's all right. You can put your own password also, that doesn't matter. These are all placeholders, so you just ensure whatever you like and you deploy it that way. Now here one thing is important, like this app environment. Okay, so if the app environment is dev, it installs it as a dev environment, and if the app environment is prod, it installs it as the prod environment. Okay, there are multiple ways in which Laravel can be installed, so we keep it as dev here. You can also run it as a prod environment app, so we can flip it around if required, but now let it be in a dev environment. So I'm not changing anything, so I just showed you like what are the group vars and what you can change. Now the second important thing to do here is to create a hosts file. Okay, so the host file can be created from this example file. So just copy this example file and name it hosts. So I copy this file and this name, so I get the hosts file here. So we have this host file, which is just a copy of the inventory example. Now we will modify the details in the host file with our details. So here are the different options, like if you are installing on a dev mode, you can install it on this server. If you want to install a prod, you can install in this server, and so on. So here we are only going to install the dev, so I will define the dev server here. So I'll put the IP address of our dev server, because in our case we only have one server in the destination, so let it be the dev server. And I'll put this IP because I want my Ansible to connect to the destination via the internal IP. This is more secure. You can, if your both servers are on the same VPC, it's just like having two different boxes in the same local area network. So we'll use the internal IP and keep the external 22 port closed for making it a secure infrastructure. So I copy this one and I'll put it on the inventory list. So if you have 50 servers, you can write the IP addresses of all those 50 servers here with demarcated by new line characters. So now we have one server, so let it be just one here. Okay, so we'll install it on the dev. And since we do not need prod, we can also remove this line. Like these are just groups in the inventory files. We discussed about it in the previous video. already. All vars, these are just variables. If you want to mention any variable which you want to pass, for example username or anything that you want to pass on, you can add them here. Okay, so for example, if our username, Ansible username is Ubuntu, we can write it here, or else we can also mention it on our Ansible command. And since we are using this user to run the command, so obviously it will be passed on, so no worries. So save the host file, second step is done. Next is to run the first playbook, that is the server setup.yaml, and see how it works. And if all goes well, then we'll run the second uh, playbook, that is laravel deploy.yaml. So that will complete the installation and we'll check whether the website is up or not. So what is the command to run the setup server? It's already here, so that when you do, you can follow it from here as well. Okay, so we did this and we have all the files here, and then we created the hosts, we set up the inventory file, and then we can run the play using the command which is given here. This is your command to run the play, minus the ask vault pass. I'll talk about this in a while. Okay, so let me tell you one more thing which you have to do before you can run the play. Okay, so one more thing that we have to do here is set up our key file. Okay, it is very important that you have your key file installed in this Ansible node, so that it can be able to uh, log into the destination server. Okay, so this step is very important. All right, so what we'll do is first we'll import our key file into this Ansible node, so that it will be able to log into the destination node. So how do we do that? The first step, it would be to have the key file in your server. So I can have the key file from my laptop to the server. We had this key file installed when, like, downloaded when we created the EC2 instance. So you would remember that step. So I saved it in the downloads directory, and let me just check what was the name of the key file for this server. So the name of the key pair was this, so I'll do a cat.pem. so this is the content of the key file, so I'll just copy this and I take it into this server. And just I can name it something like key.pem, because once it is imported I won't need this file actually. So here it is, we have this key file, and I will run the command to run the SSH agent. This agent is a listener that will actually ingest the key file. So the agent has started. Next command, SSH add, and then whatever key file you have, the name of the file. Okay, it says this is an unprotected key file, so it's always a good practice to provide a permission of 400 to that key file. So you run this command and then repeat this add command. So we have the identity added. So now we'll be able to log into the destination node. So in order to check that in order to verify whether you can log in or not, you can do one test which is also given here. So if we do this, it will try to log in into the destination node, whatever is mentioned in the host file, and it will try to run a ping command. So we can just run this. Okay, remove this -u root. We can just try this way. Okay, it works because we can also run it as a Ubuntu user. So since we get a success, that means it was able to connect to the destination server and run this command. So our playbook would also work. So let's then run the first playbook, which I said is the server setup.yaml. Okay, so for that the command again is this one. These are all the nodes related, so we can just run this simple command minus this uroot because that has been handled in other ways. And here we can run this command. This will do all the prerequisites. So let's see how it goes. So what is it doing? Gathering facts is the step where it gathers all the IP addresses, variables, and other facts of the playbooks, and then it installs the prerequisites. If there are certain changes to any directory that is changed, any packages and all, setups the firewall, sets up MariaDB, Python, sets up a root password for that server, does various things. Whatever is mentioned in the roles file, that is done. So this entire playbook executed successfully. So the first task is done. So I'm clearing the screen again. So this was the command which we ran. What is the next command? Next command will run the other playbook, that is the Laravel deploy.yaml. This is the target node where all this will be executed, and we'll be able to see the website and this IP address. So let's run this playbook. So we run our Ansible playbook command -I with the host file name and the name of the playbook. Here we are. So we have all the steps done successfully. So now since the playbook is up, we will be able to see the website. So let's go to that IP address. This is the public IP address, and open that IP. Here we are. We can see the travel website which we were trying to deploy. So we have all this drop downs, and we need to upload images and so on. So whatever the functionalities are, that will work. So this is the demonstration we were talking about for the Ansible playbook, and you also got an idea what a playbook looks like and how to arrange a playbook, how to execute a playbook. So you can keep learning more on this, and we will also have another video which will be an Ansible masterclass or Ansible deep dive session, so where we'll describe each and every aspect of Ansible and go much deeper than what we did today. Till then,